At only 32 years old, Father Sheldon was one of the youngest priests at the Sacred Heart Cathedral, and his congregation adored him for his modern outlook and compassionate heart. Yet, despite his youth, he bore the weight of a restless soul. It was this restlessness that led him to the doorstep of Club Mirage that fateful Friday night. The neon lights of the club flickered seductively, promising a world of excitement and temptation within. Father Sheldon hesitated at the entrance, clutching his Bible tightly. This was not a place for a man of God, but tonight he felt called to be here. "Guide me, O Lord," he whispered. He had heard countless confessions about the club from parishioners, tales of debauchery, despair, and the lost souls who danced under its strobe light. Sheldon had prayed for them, but prayer alone no longer felt sufficient. He needed to witness it for himself, to reach out and save even one soul. As he stepped inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and the heavy scent of cheap cologne. The bass of the music thrummed like a heartbeat, and the room was bathed in the dim, colorful glow of rotating light. Pole dancers swayed sensuously on elevated stages, their moves eliciting cheers and whistles from the crowd. At the bar, men and women mingled, their laughter mingling with the clink of glasses. Sheldon's presence drew a few curious stares, but most patrons were too absorbed in their revelry to notice the priest in their midst. Sheldon's eyes scanned the room until they landed on a woman sitting alone in a corner booth. Her presence was magnetic, yet she seemed detached from the chaos around her. She was beautiful, her dark skin glowing under the dim light, her curves accentuated by a red sequin dress. Her eyes, however, told a different story. They were wary, even hunted. This was Miss Bell. Miss Bell had been a fixture at the Club Mirage for years. To many, she was the queen of the night, a woman who could command a room with just a glance, but behind her confident facade lay a life riddled with pain. Born into poverty in the outskirts of Accra, Miss Bell had learned early that the world was unforgiving. Her dreams of becoming a nurse had been crushed when her father felt ill and the family's meager resources were drained to care for him. Desperate to survive, Miss Bell turned to the nightlife. She had told herself it will only be temporary, a means to an end. But years passed and the temporary arrangement became her life. Miss Bell's heart had hardened over time, but deep down she longed for a way out. She had just never believed one existed. When Father Sheldon approached her booth, Miss Bell raised an eyebrow. She had seen all kinds of men in this club, but a priest was a first. "Lost your way, Father?" she asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Father Sheldon smiled gently. "Perhaps I have. Or maybe I found it. Mind if I sit?" Intrigued, Miss Bell gestured to the seat opposite her. "Your funeral," she said. Their conversation began with skepticism on Miss Bell's part. When Father Sheldon talked about God. "God?" she said. "He abandoned me long ago." But Sheldon's sincerity was disarming. He spoke not of sin, but of redemption and unyielding love. "Sometimes it's in the darkest places that we find the brightest light," he said gently, leaning forward as if willing his words to reach her heart. "I don't believe God abandoned you, Miss Bell. I think you've just stopped hearing him." Miss Bell laughed bitterly. "And what will the priest know about darkness? Have you ever gone to bed hungry, knowing tomorrow will be no different? Have you ever sold pieces of yourself just to keep the people you love alive?" Sheldon's expression softened, and his eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I've never lived your pain, Miss Bell, but I've seen it. In the slums, in confessions, in the faces of people who have lost everything. But what I know is that your past doesn't define you. It's the choices you make now that matter." For the first time in years, Miss Bell felt a crack in her armor. The priest wasn't preaching at her. He was sharing her burden. Gradually, the conversation shifted. Sheldon asked about her childhood, and she found herself sharing stories she hadn't uttered in years, running barefoot in the rain with her siblings, her dreams of becoming a nurse, and the moment those dreams crumbled under the weight of her father's death. "What happened to the girl who wanted to heal people?" Sheldon asked softly. "She's gone, replaced by someone I don't even recognize," Miss Bell replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Sheldon reached into his pocket and pulled out a small worn rosary. "Maybe it's time to find her again. You are not alone, Miss Bell. God's love is still here, waiting for you, and so am I." Tears glistened in Miss Bell's eyes, but this time they were born of despair. For the first time she felt a flicker of hope. As the night wore on, they talked about everything: her struggles, his fate, and the possibility of redemption. By the end of their conversation, Miss Bell felt something shift inside her. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was the first step toward believing that change was possible. "What now, Father?" she asked, her voice trembling. Sheldon met her gaze, his own filled with determination. "Come to church. Let's talk more. We will take it one day at a time. You are not alone in this." The following Sunday, Miss Bell's appearance at Sacred Heart Cathedral caused an uproar. Whispers spread like wildfire among the congregation, but Sheldon stood firm, defending her presence as a testament to God's boundless mercy. Week by week, Miss Bell's transformation became evident. She joined prayer groups, volunteered at community events, and began dreaming of a life outside the shadows of Club Mirage. As Miss Bell blossomed into a version of herself she had almost forgotten, so did Sheldon's feelings for her. Initially, he tried to dismiss them as mere admiration for her courage and resilience. Yet every stolen glance, every heartfelt conversation, every shared prayer chipped away at his defenses. He found himself captivated by the way her laughter filled the quiet spaces of the church, how her presence seemed to bring light into the darkest corners of his mind. Miss Bell too began to notice a change within herself. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a performer or a commodity, but as a person worthy of love and redemption. Their connection deepened during an outreach event organized by the church. As they walked side by side, distributing food and offering words of comfort to those in need, their bond grew stronger. Miss Bell's heart swelled with admiration for Sheldon's selflessness, while he marveled at her newfound compassion and determination. But the growing affection was not without its challenges. One evening, Sheldon found himself in the rectory, a place that had always been his sanctuary. Now it felt stifling. He stared at the crucifix on the wall, his heart heavy with guilt. "Is this love a test of my faith?" he whispered. The silence offered no answers, only the weight of his own emotions pressing down on him. In those moments of solitude, he wrestled with the undeniable truth. He was falling in love with Miss Bell. Miss Bell, on the other hand, fought her own battles. The more she opened up to Sheldon, the more vulnerable she felt. "What if I ruin him?" she confided to one of the older women in the prayer group. "He's giving me so much hope and purpose. I can't be the reason he loses everything." The woman, wise with years of her own struggles, simply smiled. "Love doesn't ruin, Miss Bell. It transforms, but only if you let it." One fateful evening, after an emotional evening prayer, Miss Bell lingered into the sanctuary. The moonlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting a kaleidoscope of colors on the pews. Sheldon entered, his steps hesitant. Seeing her, he paused, unsure of what to say. "Miss Bell," he began, his voice soft. "Why do you stay? After everything? Why do you keep coming back?" She turned to him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Because for the first time, Father, I believe I'm not beyond saving, and that because of you." The air between them grew charged, heavy with unspoken emotions. Sheldon took a step closer, then another, until he was standing mere inches from her. "You are worth saving, more than you know," he said, with his voice barely above a whisper. In that moment, everything else faded away. Their past, their fears, the looming consequences. It was just them, two souls finding solace in each other. Yet, just as quickly as the moment came, reality crashed back in. Sheldon stepped back, his face a mixture of longing and torment. This isn't right," he said, his voice trembling. "I need time to think." Miss Bell watched him go, her heart heavy yet strangely hopeful. For both of them, that night marked the turning point. It wasn't just about their feelings for each other. It was about confronting their deepest fears and deciding what sacrifices they were willing to make for love. Father Sheldon wrestled with his emotions for days. His prayers became desperate whispers in the silence of the rectory. Torn between his vows and the undeniable pull of his heart, he sought the counsel of Father Dominic, an older priest who had mentored him since ordination. "I feel as though I'm being torn apart," Sheldon confessed, pacing the length of Father Dominic's modest office. "How can love, something so pure, feel like betrayal, Father?" Father Dominic steadied him with kind, discerning eyes. Love is never wrong, Sheldon, but the path you chose must align with your faith and the responsibilities you've taken on. You must ask yourself, are you being called to serve God in a new way? Or is this a testament of your commitment to your vows? Sheldon left the conversation still unsure of what to do, but the words haunted him as he navigated his duties. Meanwhile, Miss Bell struggled with her own doubts. Despite her growing faith and her blossoming hope for a better life, she couldn't shake the feeling that her past was a shadow that could swallow both her and Sheldon if she let it. One Sunday after Mass, Miss Bell was approached by a man she hadn't seen in years. Kwame, a former club patron, who had once claimed to love her, but had only used her for his gain. His presence was a sharp reminder of her old life. Well, Kwame sneered, his smile laced with mockery. Miss Bell the saint, I almost didn't recognize you, without the red dress and heels. Miss Bell's heart sank. What do you want, Kwame? She asked, her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. Just reminding you that people don't forget, Miss Bell. You can put on all the hallows you want, but I know who you are, and I can remind your precious priest too. Miss Bell's blood ran cold. The threat in his words were clear. She knew Kwame was capable of doing anything. She rushed to the church, hoping to warn Sheldon before Kwame could do any damage. That evening, Kwame made good on his threat. He stormed into the church during evening prayers, his voice echoing through the sanctuary. Father Sheldon, he yelled, do you even know who you are protecting? This woman, this so-called angel, used to entertain men like me every night. Are you willing to throw away your calling for someone like her? Gasps rippled through the congregation. Miss Bell, standing at the back of the church, felt the weight of every stare. Tears streamed down her face as the walls of her new life began to crumble. Sheldon stood firm at the altar, his voice calm but resolute. What Miss Bell's past holds is between her and God, not you, Kwame. She has chosen a new path, and I will not let anyone drag her back into darkness. Kwame smirked. And what about your path, Father? Are you willing to break your vows for her? The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Sheldon hesitated, his heart pounding. The silence stretched until Miss Bell broke it. No, he's not, Miss Bell said, stepping forward. Sheldon, I will not let you destroy everything you've worked for because of me. Their eyes met, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. Sheldon approached her, the congregation watching in stunned silence. Miss Bell, he said in his voice trembling, you have taught me more about faith, resilience, and love than I ever thought possible. But if you truly believe I should stay in this role, I will. Not because of duty, but because I trust your judgment. Miss Bell shook her head, her voice breaking. No, Sheldon, you belong here, but I don't belong in your shadow. I need to stand on my own. In the weeks that followed, Miss Bell made the painful decision to leave Sacred Heart Cathedral. With Sheldon's help, she found a program that supported women leaving the sex trade, providing education and job training. She threw herself into her studies, determined to become the nurse she had once dreamed of being. Sheldon, meanwhile, recommitted himself to his priesthood. Though his heart ached with every memory of Miss Bell, he used her story as inspiration for his sermons, urging his congregation to embrace love and redemption in all its forms. A year later, Miss Bell stood on the steps of a community clinic in a crisp white nurse's uniform. Her heart swelled with pride as she welcomed patients, her past now a distant memory. Among the crowd, she saw a familiar figure, Father Sheldon. He smiled at her, a bittersweet expression of pride and lingering affection. I always knew you could do it, he said. And I always knew you'd never stop believing in me, Miss Bell replied. Though their path had diverged, they both understood that their love had not been a mistake. It had been a catalyst, transforming them into the best versions of themselves. And while they could never be together, they carried each other in their hearts as proof of the redemptive power of faith, hope, and love.